Welcome you all to yet another video on daily current affairs. And today we will be discussing about the India-US trade deal, which is of utmost importance to this examination, both from the prelims and also the mains point of view. So, in this particular topic, we will be discussing about what tariff is in the first place. Of course, we will not go too much in detail because the main issue here is to understand why is India being, imposed with the tariffs, or to say the reciprocal tariffs. Even before we jump into the topic, we'll simply understand what tariff is. Tariff, in simple term, is a tax that are imposed by an importing country on their foreign goods. And this is generally done to protect the interests of the domestic producers, and in most cases the government also indulge or impose these kind of tariffs to reduce its dependence on the imports. And since we are talking about reciprocal tariffs, it is that particular tariff which we also called as tit for tat tariff for a reason, because here when one country responds to another country's tariffs by imposing similar tariffs, we call that particular situation as reciprocal tariffs, that the country is imposing reciprocal tariffs on other countries, just like how US is doing with the other countries. But the question is, why, what is the context that we are discussing all of this? So ever since US sanctioned or US imposed tariffs on various countries, especially the worst hit are the Asian countries like the Philippines, Vietnam, Myanmar, etc. India somehow with some other countries except China got a 90-day exemption from the US taxation. And the issue is, or let's say the importance of the topic is, that this ends on 1st of August 2025, which means after 1st of August 2025, even India also will be taxed under the same tax rule. So now, what is the issue? Of course, it will definitely hurt the Indian economy, especially the Indian exporters. And another important aspect is that the government, a team of delegates, has recently, I believe, in the past week, has went and has already reached the Washington DC to discuss for a particular deal to come to an understanding so as to ensure that India doesn't come under this particular reciprocal tariffs. So the question is, why India is being imposed? Of course, it's an irony because when we just rewind back to 2019, India actually had benefited from US, because in 2019 when in 2019 when China and US was in a trade war, USA had imposed tariffs on Chinese automobile parts, for which the USA manufacturers completely dependent on the Indian automotive parts. And this helped the Indian economy, especially the exports of the auto component parts from the India increased to the US. Of course, both the nations benefited from this. But suddenly, what is that particular need for US to put tariffs on India? So that's the biggest question. So now if you see, or if we try to understand the situation, this generally happens on few scenarios where, especially in the global trade, there are three pillars under which negotiations happen. First is diplomacy. The second aspect is, let's say, through some favors, because one country wants to favor another country, it might reduce tariffs and so on and so forth. And third, the most possible and the obvious reason is the mutual understanding. So these are the three aspects through which negotiations usually happen. And here, when these three things doesn't work, that is when a dominating country, or I can say the most powerful or the most economically strong country, will go or take this particular route as a bargaining tool to pressurize the weaker country, and in this particular case it's India. So now, why does USA wants to pressurize India, which means USA definitely wants something in return? So there are few things which USA is demanding from India, and this is only because India has few restrictions on the imports that India does, and especially for the American goods that India imports, there are a lot of restrictions. So USA wants India to let go of all these restrictions. So we will understand what the restrictions are. So the first and foremost is the US agriculture product. So US wants India to completely make the market open for their products, especially USA expects India to import more apples, more almonds, and even especially the GM crops, for which India is kind of closed right now. And second important thing is that it wants India to reduce imports on all its cars and the auto parts. I hope it is very clear that we do have very high import duty, almost 100% on all the abroad the cars that we import, and USA wants India to remove that. And third important thing is the tax, or let's say the import duties that we have on all the imported liquors, especially all those liquors, especially Jack Daniels. The import duty is almost 150%. So USA expects India to neutralize it, and also on the medical equipments that India sells it to, the US sells it to the Indian market, because the stents, the knee replacement implants, and few organ implants that India actually tries to meddle with the pricing to make it more affordable to the local markets. But the USA expects India to remove all those barriers, and it expects that it becomes more costlier and more profitable for them, which India is totally against. And this is a bit controversial, but still, yeah, BRICS membership. Since India holds one of the and is also one of the most active members in the BRICS conglomerate, this kind of is posing as a threat to USA's global economic power. So I think India's even the active involvement in the BRICS is also one of the reasons that US is trying to do this. And of course, subsequently for this particular thing, India also tried easing the tension by doing various things. Even in the recent budget, it reduced the import duties on some of the big high-end motorcycles, especially those which are above 1600 cc. They reduced the tariffs from 50% all the way to 30%. And even recently, the import duty that was almost like 150% on the bourbon whiskey was completely brought down to 50%. And meanwhile, India also increased its energy imports and also has completely increased its defense equipments. So, of course, India is trying from its end to do the best. But is this the final solution? Or can any country, or let's say India for that matter, go to that extent that it keeps on reducing its import duties on all the things that US wants or any other country wants? Of course, on the long run, in the short run, it might help, it might ease out the tension, but in the long run, it is definitely going to affect the Indian economy. And if, let's say, India doesn't agree to reduce its tariffs, it is ultimately going to kind of invite more impositions and sanctions. So it is kind of a dilemma for India as to what it will do. And of course, we'll have to keep and wait and see what's the outcome of this particular situation. But to sum it up, I think it's very important for India right now to hit the middle ground, to catch a balanced approach and make sure that it defends its core economic interests. And also, it is very important that we as a country diversify our export markets and just not completely focus ourselves or channelize ourselves to the US market. And another important aspect that India can do as of now is to probably enhance its ties or alliance with the major superpowers, especially the European Union, for that matter, Russia, and even for that matter, China, to kind of maintain strategic autonomy and also probably ease the tensions a bit. So that's all for now. Probably we will stay tuned with what goes and what happens going forward. And for more such videos, stay tuned and keep watching Believers IAS Academy. Signing off, Madan Gopal. Thank you.